Principal, Professor Derek Chady, faculty deans, heads of departments of the UW St. Augustine campus, Professor Roger Hosein, our featured speaker and professor of economics, staff and students of the UW St. Augustine campus, friends and family of Professor Hosein, our specially invited guests, members of the media, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Shirin Haque, Chair of the Open Lectures Committee here at UW St. Augustine, and for this evening's session by Professor of Economics, Professor Roger Hosein. We are extremely pleased and excited to host you this evening. A major role of universities has been the creation of new knowledge via research to move countries and humanity forward. And in this scenario, the role of the Open Lectures Committee is to host professorial inaugural lectures to showcase the research and work of the campus's recently appointed or promoted professors. These folks have truly excelled in their intellectual mandate. Furthermore, the role of this committee is also to advance the university's knowledge transfer agenda via high-quality open lectures by exceptional local, regional, and international speakers. And Nobel laureates and heads of states have graced these stages in the past. These lectures are therefore just one of the platforms that our campus uses to engage the wider national community on issues relevant to local and regional development, impact regional policy making, analysis, and evaluation, and stimulate and encourage the pursuit of excellence. So be sure to follow the UW St. Augustine Facebook page where you will see information on upcoming events. So I'm a scientist by profession, a bit removed from the world of economics, so I decided to look up what is it that an economist does. This is what I came upon from Lawrence Peter. An economist is an expert who will know tomorrow why the things he predicted yesterday didn't happen today. So the conversation starts today and will definitely be continuing into tomorrow and beyond for sure. At this point, I would like to invite Professor Derek Chady, Deputy Campus Principal, St. Augustine Campus, to deliver opening remarks. Let us welcome him to the stage.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, Professor Shirin Haque, Chair of Open Lectures Committee, Professor Roger Hosein, our featured speaker, guest of honor, Professor of Economics, family and friends of Professor Hosein, members of the campus executive management team, Dr. Kohler Lewis Cameron, Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, and other faculty deans, heads of department of the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus, Dr. Jerome Tilak Singh, moderator for today, Dr. Bo Tiwari, former campus principal of the St. Augustine campus, staff and students of the UWI St. Augustine campus, our specially invited guest, professors of the University of the West Indies. I really want to recognize you, especially on this occasion. Those of you, and I see here quite a few of you are attending today's session, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasant good evening to everyone once again. Campus Principal Antoine sends her best wishes and congratulations to Professor Roger Hosein on this occasion. And she's guarded to attend another event, but sincerely wished to be here this afternoon. It is both an honor and a pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of the Campus Principal of the St. Augustine campus to this evening's Professorial Inaugural Lecture by Professor Roger Hosein, titled Fostering Economic Growth in the Bust Phase of the Boom-Bust Cycle. Professorial Inaugural Lectures are significant milestones in the academic journey of our faculty. They not only they not only mark the conferral of the title of professor, but also provide a platform for our scholars to share their research and insights with the wider community. These lectures remind us that scholarship remains at the heart of the University of the West Indies and are a vital rite of passage that should not pass unnoticed by the campus community and the public alike. They celebrate our colleagues' achievements while offering a window into the intellectual labor that has defined their careers. They also reinforce that the University of the West Indies' enduring commitment to the advancement of knowledge, the cultivation of thought, leadership, and the generation of solutions grounded in lived realities of our Caribbean context. I wish to commend the Open Lectures Committee and Professor Shireen Haque as chair of that committee for continuing to ensure that these events remain a distinguished feature of our academic calendar. This evening, we are especially privileged to hear from Professor Roger Hosein, a scholar who has contributed to the field of economics, particularly in international trade development and the economic vulnerability of small states, and have been both profound and impactful. Professor Hosein's academic journey, is a testament to resilience and dedication. From humble beginnings, he pursued his O and A levels independently, going on to earn a BSc in economics from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. His academic excellence earned him a scholarship to the University of Cambridge, where he obtained his PhD in economics in the year 2000. Since then, he has been an integral member of the Department of Economics, contributing significantly to teaching, research, outreach, and advocacy. The rank of professorship, we must remember, is not simply a title. It's not just saying professor. It symbolizes scholarly authority, leadership in one's field, and the significant influence in one's contributions at the national, regional, and international levels. It is a rank that is reserved for those who have distinguished themselves as outstanding academics, and Professor Hosein has undeniably done so. His research interests spanned a wide terrain, including the Dutch disease, immigration theory, regional integration, and structural challenges faced by small island developing states. He has authored and co-authored several books and published widely in regional and international journals. His work is not only academically rigorous, but also policy relevant and socially engaged. Beyond academia, Professor Hosein has embraced a highly visible and public role. His economic analysis are frequently featured in print, broadcast, and digital media, reflecting his commitment to public discourse and the practical applications of economic knowledge. Of course, with public commentary comes public scrutiny and at times criticism. But part of being an academic is standing firm on evidence-based analysis, engaging with critique, and enriching the conversation through informed debate. This is much easier said than done. Indeed, Professor Hosein has used his platform not just to inform, but to act. One notable instance was in 2024, when he participated in a seedling distribution initiative hosted by the Shaw Foundation in collaboration with the Couva Point Lisa's Chamber of Commerce. His advocacy for food self-sufficiency as a strategy to mitigate the cost of living underscores his belief in scholarship as a tool for transformation. As the coordinator of the UWI Trade and Economic Development Unit, He has also played a pivotal role in shaping policy discussions across the Caribbean, helping to advance our understanding of the economic challenges and opportunities facing our region. This evening lecture is particularly timely, we should note. For Trinidad and Tobago, like many resource-dependent economies, the bust phase of the economic cycle is marked by fiscal tightening, reduced investments, and heightened social vulnerability. Professor Hosein's lecture invites us to consider strategic responses that combine microeconomic stabilization with diversification, innovation, and long-term structural reform. Professor Hosein, I want to extend my heartfelt congratulations on your well-earned appointment to the rank of professorship. Your scholarly contributions, extensive publications, and tireless service to both academia and public life have earned the respect of your peers and admiration of your students. Your work exemplifies scholarship with purpose, grounded in empirical evidence, and committed to regional transformation. As we look forward to your lecture, I encourage everyone to engage fully with the presentation today, to ask questions, to reflect on how we can all contribute to building a more resilient, sustainable, and diversified future for Trinidad and Tobago and the wider community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chedi, for those very insightful remarks. I will now like to invite Dr. Akwaola Cameron-Lewis, the Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences, to introduce our speaker. Please welcome her to the stage.
Deputy Campus Principal, Professor Chedi, and all other distinguished ladies and gentlemen who have joined us here this evening, and particular mention to the media as well. I was listening to our Deputy Campus Principal and thinking, okay, he has told us a lot about Roger, and I'm wondering, well, what else can I say? And the good thing about it is that Roger is so distinguished that even after hearing all of that about him, there's still a lot more that we can say. And so it is my privilege to introduce a scholar, a leader, and regional change maker on the occasion of this, his inaugural professorial lecture. Our speaker's academic journey is nothing short of extraordinary. Having won over 20 scholarships and academic awards, he has long exemplified the highest standards of academic excellence. Yet his brilliance extends far beyond the classroom or even the lecture theater. As a proud member of the Faculty of Social Sciences, he not only excelled academically, but also led athletically, captaining the faculty's cricket team for several years, demonstrating very early on the leadership and teamwork that would come to define his career. His influence in academia is deep and wide. He has served on the editorial teams of multiple respected journals, and perhaps more notably, he has supervised the highest number of PhD students from the Department of Economics, shaping the future of Caribbean economics through the mentorship of the next generation. His impact also resonates across the region and beyond. He currently serves as Commissioner for CARICOM and has represented the UE at the Council for the Trade and Economic Development meeting since 2010. As the lead technical researcher from the UE on critical national programs such as GATE, he has directly shaped educational as well as developmental policy. Now, as we all know, his expertise has been consistently relied upon by the Caribbean governments, notably he was instrumental in crafting the national compensation framework for fishermen impacted by seismic surveys. He also served as the lead architect behind two of the region's flagship microfinance institutions. These institutions include the Mayaro Initiative for Private Enterprise Development, otherwise known as MIPED, as well as the Loan for Enterprise and Network Development, the LEND program. Ladies and gentlemen, he has also held key roles of influence, including serving as a former director on the board of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, and his efforts were most recently recognized when he was awarded the UWI's Best Researcher accolade in 2024. Within our university system, he has been instrumental in transforming the Trade and Economic Development Unit into one of the most respected and productive units in the UWI system, all while remaining an active and respected voice in public economic discourse. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a scholar of distinction, a mentor of many, and a truly humble servant of the Caribbean, Professor Roger Hosein.
Good evening, everyone. All protocol observed. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. You know, I am seeing a lot of my former students and some current students. I'm also seeing quite a few people. I can't see so well now, but I also saw quite a few people who played a very instrumental role in my growth and progression at the university. So for sure, I noticed Dr. Tiwari. He came in after the photographer finished taking some pictures, because I was hoping for one of them, I'll get it after. And you know, he spent a lot of time. I never really understood policy making. I would just write and do theoretical work. And I have learned so much from him in taking information and transcribing it into something useful, because that's something we are not trained in the classroom for. So you tell me to design a formula for gate or dollar for dollar, I will do that very easily. I will drop some diagrams and whatnot. And then he will take this and bring it to life and make it usable. And that's something that really helped me along my journey. I saw Professor Gonzalez, I'm sure somewhere, genius. Oh, yeah. You know, very, very humble gentleman. I remember the first time I spoke to him, I was so impressed. We went to Geneva together several times, and you know, the World Trade Organization would present their flagship document, and the first hand that would go up would be Professor Gonzalez, and he would hold the floor for about 45 minutes, and I would just sit there and all. And it's truly amazing, and I encourage all students to, you know, when you get the opportunity to interact with people like this, and even now, when I have informal seminars I am now seeing my son here, thank God he came. And even now when I have seminars, he would come on, and he has so much knowledge, he would impart it to people very willingly, and if there are very few people, when I have a challenge with a particular concept I could turn to. And he and Dr. Tiwari have two of the minds that I engage. I would call them all the time and every time and say, well, you know, I don't agree with this. And they would patiently and calmly talk to me, and we would disagree, and we would work it out. And it's just a gold mine of opportunities. And I hope one day that as time goes by, I hope I am already that, and I could do more of that for my students as we go along. You know, I take my students extremely seriously. I was speaking to one of them earlier today, I would have seminars off the timetable all the time. So one of the reasons the Trade and Economic Development Unit could have a high productivity, and you will see my PowerPoint just now, is that economics to me is like cricket. You know, it's or playing football. I enjoy it. It's not work. And so I try to pass that on to them. I'm sure I saw Martin Franklin somewhere. Right. You know, I was fortunate, and I think this is when I really took off as an economist. More than any other time period in my life, it was when Martin Franklin was the head of the Department of Economics. He would run the department in a manner and form where he would remove all obstacles. He basically will come to work and create the enabling environment for you to be productive. In fact, I could say the same about our dean. If you were, that's a good thing she came up here, you would have wanted to know what a student doing here. She is a young girl, and she runs the faculty in a similar way. She runs it just like Martin ran the department, within a perimeter of no conflict. Let's get down to the points. Let's remove all the frills and get the work done. And that's the best environment. I have thrived under both of these people. They set the template for real research to be done. Martin would never call you into his office to discuss what's the price of a cookie or a rubber slippers or any nonsense like that. He sets the environment, and you know with Martin, listen, you have your lecture to go and do, you have this to go and do, come and do your people business, and everything will be smooth. And I really, really admire that. In fact, at one point in time, I think when Martin was here, our department was the most productive department in the university, if I remember correctly, Mr. Franklin. It's dangerous to identify people because sometimes you forget. Hayden should be here somewhere. I remember doing my first consultancy exercise with Hayden and realizing how easy it is to make money. Money as an economist. I had to manage that because it's easy to get carried away. I always say to the dean, there is a lot of money out there, and you have to manage it with your work because you could get carried away. What I would say to some of the young people here that I see is a strategy I learned whilst being here is you could link your publications to your research consultancy and at least move up a notch from a solo and a bara to probably a piece of jerk chicken or rotisserie by working on things that you can publish, by doing consultancies in areas that you can publish. And it works reasonably well if you are serious, but you cannot do it if you are not serious. Because if the university sets criteria for you to meet a certain amount of publication within a certain time period of a certain standard, you have to respect that, and you cannot run away and do consultancy without meeting the criteria of the university. So it's a balancing act, but it's really a joy to contribute to the growth and development of the university in a way. I mean, I have paid my salaries. I hope the university can give me a really nice departure gift. I have paid my salary several times at the university over. So, having said that, see if I can get over there. I am going to go into the journey. Now, it's very difficult to summarize your academic journey in 40 minutes, and now it's probably about 30. It's very, very difficult. So I had to pick and choose. You know, this will take about 10 days. So I had to pick and choose little aspects here and there. So now that I am close to the last 10 years of my career, I think I could safely say I learned the most economics when I used to sell in the market. I mean, I can't think. When I went to Cambridge, all I did was learn mathematics to what I learned in the market. The market is a real place, and I could debate and probably have an edge, on some of my colleagues because I know how a market works. I sold in the market for 3 years. I understand real dynamic action, reaction, Courtnotes, Nash equilibrium in a live format. And most of my colleagues talk about it on a whiteboard. and on a night shining teak table, but they can't talk about it with the rain falling and the sun blasting on you and people telling you they want no egg and things like that. I learned real action-reaction economics. Some of the most complex mathematics I learned it in the market. And at the end of my career, in the last 10 years, I could still maintain that doing an internship and learning some practical economics is very, very rewarding as you progress along the ladder of life. You know, and I had some career options that would have taken me very far away from this point here. Early on in life, I used to catch crab. And, you know, I would go in the mangrove, and I would push my entire hand down into the crab hole. Sometimes you would pull out fish. Sometimes you would pull out something called wabine. Sometimes, once I pull out an eel, and all kind of complicated things. But it was a journey that helped me appreciate the steps that came later on. And then, of course, at one point in time, I had to make a serious choice between my ambitions to play for West Indies, which never worked out anyway, and to go and do economics. I always sit in my quiet moments and wonder whether I made the right choice. I still am not sure. But I had really liked cricket, and later on in life, when I realized I couldn't make, I started to write on cricket. So I saw one of my colleagues here from the sports department with whom I wrote a paper or two on Brian Lara and on the Olympics and so on. And then, you know, I was going through my bookshelf and I found this book here. So after I left school, under very complicated situation in Form 3, you know, my dad had died and I basically probably went to school from Form 3 to Form 5 maybe about 25 times. 25 times in total. And it was very complicated. The principal used to have to send money for me to come to school. Good man, very good man. And I would go sometimes I would take the money and spend it. And I one day encountered this book by Professor R.G. Lipsey. And I took it with me into the mangrove where I had set out some crab chop, and I sat on a mangrove tree. I could distinctly remember where, when, and what time. And I started to read it. And I said to myself, but this thing just like catching crab. This thing is so alive to me, so interactive to me. I was always good at mathematics. And as I read it, I think I read all the book in about a week. And then I would hear my colleagues, I had dropped out of school for complicated reasons, and I hear my colleagues who were still doing A-levels talk about how hard economics is. So I got frightened, I got worried, and I never used to interact with them on it. I kept my thought privately. And then I took a gamble. I mean, it used to always be a burden on me, deputy principal, that all my colleagues were moving ahead and doing A-levels, and I knew I had the capacity to, in terms of comparative rank, for the time period that I was at school, that I should take a gamble. And I wrote 5 A-levels in 5 months. Whilst I was catching crab and all these things, and I passed 3. And I got a B in economics. And I said, well, what is this? So I applied to the university and I got you. I said, well, all right. And then when I came to the university, I realized that if you do well, people give you money. The university will give you money. Well, that is the worst thing you can tell me. And Shireen would have been my year in a different sense. I started to intensely study. To the extent by the time I left university, after a number of other activities, I was able to buy a house. I thought the system was flawed. I thought people were paying me to move ahead and to do well. So I said, good, I taken that. And I continued, you know, I had some entrepreneurial ambition. In 1990, Trinpad Limited had a competition. Who sell the most copybook in Trinidad and Tobago wins some money. I think it was $20,000 or some ridiculous amount of money, deputy principal. I said, well, these people had to be mad. You are saying to me that if I work hard, sell these copybooks, that you are going to give me even more money on top of my profits? Well, I won first, second, and third place in the competition. And I took it very seriously. I went on. So after reading this book, I came to the university dean, and this remains with me to today. I tried as best as I could. I never had the direct influence, and as you become busy, it becomes more difficult. But I'm glad you are here, and I'm saying it openly to you. It's absolutely ridiculous that we don't have our own equivalent first-year economics text at the university. I never had the chance to teach first year, not that I want to, Dean, but I mean, if I am willing to, I think we must have our own text. And I vowed to myself I was going to change that. And I started on a journey to write. And these are some of the texts that I work on here. I'm glad Dr. Tiwari in particular is here, Prof. Gonzalez. And I cannot forget Rebecca Gokul, who is sitting behind the dean, a young student, PhD, who did a PhD with me, high commendation, and with whom I continue to do intense technical research on various topics. Some of the people you would see here, I called Renita Sicharan last night. She is in Argentina. She is the chief economist for CAF. I called Jitendra Kedan. He's at the World Bank. The students go on to hold top positions all around the world because I take it very seriously. I was the lead author of the O-level text for economics and then for A-level economics. But I see those things as superficial. I did those things as basic exercise. What I think we need is definitely something equivalent to the LIPSI. There's a rich volume of material and we can do it. We just need to get the teams together at the first year level of economics and get it done. It's absolutely ridiculous that X years after the Department of Economics started that we don't have our own text. And this is my honest opinion, and I hope that the machinery helps me to put it in place. I find it boring to work on journal papers, so I struggled in my career for a bit because I like to work on one topic for an extensive period of time, 9 months to a year, and I had to adapt because Patrick Watson would always say to me, you need to put things into the journals. And I found that easy, but boring. So I took on what I found to be bigger task. I went after deep, entrenched conversations via the form of textbooks. And it has really helped me develop and grow over the years. And I think it's something I always encourage. Once a student finishes his or her PhD, I always try to engage them on a book. And I see Liva Bodwam here, who's an outstanding young scholar. She's working on a book with me. And I know she's very hesitant to go abroad, but I know CARICOM has her on the radar to call her anytime. So this year is Brian Lara scoring test cricket on the horizontal axis and West Indies test score, less Brian Lara test score on the vertical axis. And as you can see, the more runs Lara made is the less West Indies, the non-Lara West Indies team made. So maybe they relaxed. I could remember clearly this guy by the name of Wavell Hines, who, will chip down the wicket and get bowled or would try to hook and always the ball would never reach the boundary. And there is a tendency and the capacity for a great factor of production and to diminish the capacity of others by virtue of being very reliable. By virtue of Lara being very reliable and very capable, others around him will say, well, no, Lara to come after, or don't worry, Lara there. And therefore, for those of you all who follow cricket, you would probably remember the name Ramnaresh Sawan. And he would try to hook and the ball would never reach the boundary. But he could take those chances because Lara is there and making 400 and 500 and that's what a booming talent could do to the production function of a team. This year, let me hope it works.
But again, he's slow, pedestrian, laborious.
I think when it bounces up.
I hope a few of you all recognize that as Gonzalo Higuain, one of the most hated players from Argentina ever, because he missed a penalty from about 2 inches, a goal from about 2 inches in 2014. Now,
but again,
this is Messi here in 2014. How does he look? Happy? Well, he wouldn't. He lost the World Cup to Germany that year. And so not all factors of production and not all booming talent results in extremely high output. You could get good output, but it doesn't always work out well if you don't have the right intersectoral linkages. This is him here again. This is probably when he was watching the trophy when the Germans was collecting it. But how does he look here? Looks happy. This is in 2022 when very deservingly he won the World Cup. And I say he, but it's really Argentina, led by him. Again, him here, happy. And this is the game against Poland. Now, against Poland, 10 minutes before this particular play I'm going to show you all, Messi got a penalty and the Polish goalkeeper pushed it out. So Messi missed the penalty. And so if they didn't win this game, because they had lost to Saudi Arabia, they had beaten Mexico after, and then the next side was Poland. If they didn't win this game, they would have been probably at risk of being eliminated.
Second time in their history. Molina's cross, there's the effort, and there is the...
So this team, in the context of a decline in productive activity by Messi, at a particular point in the progression of the team, was able to move forward to play Australia in the next rounds of the 2022 World Cup because they had other dependable talents and capacity on the side that could have taken the weight when one of the main talents on the side was unable to produce as expected. That is very important. If you want a team to go forward as you would like, you have to build up all the aspects of the team, otherwise you will get something called asymptotic stagnancy, which is what Trinidad and Tobago has now.
Second time in...
And you know, one of the things that I always say to my students is that men of a fat and fertile soil are most commonly effeminate and cowards, whereas contrary-wise, a barren country makes men temperate by necessity and by consequence careful, vigilant, and industrious.
First time I've seen that. Chambers in 1, Burns in 2, Bailey in 3, Bolt, the Olympic champion and world record holder in 4, Gay, the defending champion in 5, Powell, the fast man who usually fails to deliver in 6, Patton in 7, Thompson in lane 8. Away first time, good start from Bolt. Bolt leading a moment and going away. Gay trying to go with him and he's being dragged through to second place, but he's going to win it by 2 meters. First time I've seen that.
So that there is Usain Bolt in 2009 in China, winning the men's 100 meter in 9.58 seconds. He went on to also smash the 200 meter record. And that's because Bolt doesn't come from a land with crude oil and natural gas. And it's in his best interest to go out there and break records and do the best he can because he has no latitudinal fallback. He has no real latitudinal fallback when he goes home. So he comes from a relatively poor country in comparison to other countries with oil and gas. And therefore, he had to put in long, hard, substantive effort in order to reap rewards that he would like. And so we know the results. And that record will probably stand just like Messi for many, many years to come. Now, this year is IMF data that came out 2 days ago. And I am showing IMF data for April 2025. So the IMF makes 2 releases of data for the year in April and in October. They issue their database. Now, most people, I as an economist and a very seasoned economist, when I see these things, I focus on the database. I don't really bother with the actual report. If you go to the data, you write the report in your head as you go along. So I focus on the data. I downloaded the data for 2023, 2024, and 2025 April. And if the 2025 database will go until 2030, the 2024 until 2029, and the 2023 until 2028. So that you have a broad overlap period at least until 2028, and all of them start at 1980. So I extracted the data from the 3 databases for April 2023, April 2024, and April 2025. I converted them into an index number with the same base year, 2005, and I plotted them one against the other. And this is the outlook for the Trinidad and Tobago economy. My family is here, and I occasionally lecture to them on the facts of the Trinidad and Tobago economy. This is the reality of the Trinidad and Tobago economy. And if you see April 2025 there, you would see even between 2027 and 2028, the growth of that orange line, the lowest one, which is April 2025, is not sharp. In other words, even after Manatee comes on stream, growth of the Trinidad and Tobago economy is not going to be very buoyant. So, and if you look at the actual underlying growth numbers, because this is an index number that I created from the growth numbers, you will see it's about 2.70 or 3.1, and then it falls to about 2.1. You will see it starts to fall off after 2027. And with Dragon in some political hot waters now for a number of reasons, and with Calypso not yet given final approval, the medium term until 2035 is one that we have to manage very, very carefully in the Trinidad and Tobago economy. We have to manage it very carefully. But another thing I want you to notice is that each year, each database, the index number gets lower. So something the IMF is seeing when it comes every year in the Trinidad and Tobago economy that is causing them to lower the growth numbers for each year. So if you would notice very clearly, although let us say until about 2019, the 3 lines coincide, Deputy Principal, after 2019 you could see them diverting, and the latest forecast is definitely lower. April 2025 is definitely lower than the one that was made in April 2023. So in other words, all you make sure and plant some bhaji and plant some tomatoes in the back of all your yard. Now, all of this management have to take place in a background against which the interest payments as a percent of capital expenditures is starting to rise. So in other words, your fiscal space is being eroded in part by money you are spending on interest payments for money you borrow, and you don't have as much latitudinal flexibility to deepen capital injections, which is what you need in an economy where the labor force participation rate stands at about 55%. And the challenge before us is we now have to do all this navigational management in a setting in which we have a non-energy fiscal balance. So if we had no energy, we're in real trouble. Our non-energy fiscal balance averages about minus 23 billion in the latter years of the data. And if you were to take net official reserves and extract from that the money we owe abroad in external debt, you would see it is 36.8 million, US 36.8 million in 2024. And this number has since been updated. I can tell you that number now is, because I checked it a few minutes before I came, I didn't get time to change any slide, it's minus 273 million US. Net reserves at the central bank less external debt is minus 273 million US. So the medium term requires careful, intelligent management. But you know, Trinidad and Tobago nationals could work. We are people, routinely I work 15 hours a day, routinely. And I love what I do. Doing economics is like playing marble pitch or hockey or football or something like that for me. I could do that night and day. In fact, people have to tell me stop working sometimes. But the challenge is I cannot go to work, or I cannot express my productivity as I want, because I sometimes am afraid to go to different places because of the murder level. So it's something that stifles me and stifles my capacity. Imagine if you go football and you finish 8:30 in the night football, you're worried about getting to your car. How can you be productive in that setting? If I have to do a lecture, Dean, on campus and finish 8 p.m., I'm paranoid about walking to my car. And you just have to take a gamble. It's almost like taking a gamble. Now, that doesn't mean somebody going to come with a gun and hold you up. The thing is the perception of fear that I'm talking about. So this brings us to how we could carve the way forward. So in a quick narrative story, the point A represents a space in productive activity in 1996 where we produced two goods, a tradable good and a non-tradable good. The point B is a space around 2006 to 2014 where, because of a surge in natural gas, we were able to produce more tradable goods, one of which is natural gas intensive goods, for example, methanol, urea, LNG, and so on. B is a hypothetical point because it assumes no government intervention. But once the government starts to intervene, the economy switched to a point such as C, which is where you had a lot of transfers and subsidies and everything was being subsidized and the economy drifted to a point like C. But when you start to introduce all these subsidies into the economy, people become relaxed. People think that life has become easier, and so your labor force participation rate declines from about 64% down to about 55%. And mankind sit down on the block and do whatever they want sometimes, and they become relaxed. So you have a perverse impact from transfers and subsidies on your labor force participation rate, and you end up at a point close to the unproductive space. That would be about 2015, 16, 17, and then at that point, you had a massive inflow of Venezuelans that are substantively unregistered. For simplicity, I would say 60,000 Venezuelans, of which about 16,525 are registered, so the majority are unregistered. And where do unregistered people work? They go and work in bar and cafe and casino and those type of places in the back room, and they are unregistered and they are in the informal sector, so they increase the production of unregistered informal sector goods. So the economy drifted from A to B to C to D, and we are now at our point such as E. Now really where we want to be as we move forward is a point such as F. If you notice, F is to the right of E and a little lower. So if it's a little lower, it means you produce a little less non-tradable goods, and to the right of E means that we produce more tradable goods. So in the geography of this thing is very important. It's very important that our leaders that come into play after Monday understand that the geography of the production possibility frontier and the underlying dynamics associated with this is what would bail out the economy if we get the mathematics correct. Now, all of this in a setting where we generated $526 billion in energy revenues, in $433 billion in energy revenues, and we spent $526 billion on one line item, transfers and subsidies. And you know, you would speak out on it, you will talk about it, and yet still you will hear the promises on the both platforms this time around with pensions and salary increases and the whole works that we all know about. And it is putting a lot of pressure on the transfers and subsidies component in a setting where the energy revenues is very damp and on the way down. Not good. Not good. One line item accounted for all of the energy revenues in this hypothetical, not hypothetical, but in this cumulative scenario here. So this is actual data. When you cumulate it, this is what you get. And so we had no money left in principle for anything else. All the money went on transfers and subsidies, every single cent in cumulative format. That doesn't mean in a particular year money wasn't spent on gate and wasn't spent on that. I'm saying when you sum the money spent on transfers and subsidies and you compare it to the amount of money we collected on energy revenues, the amount of money spent on transfers and subsidies by far superseded energy revenues. And when you look at the relationship between transfers and subsidies and the overall fiscal balance, as transfers and subsidies increased, the fiscal balance, overall fiscal balance worsened, which should surprise no one. Consumption, as Professor James Dusenberry in 1948 said, consumption has a built-in inertia. It is difficult to reverse. So be careful how you boost people consumption habits via transfers and subsidies, because it would be difficult to reverse. Well, that's a difficult thing to say in this country, and transfers and subsidies continue to be very, very buoyant in a setting where the government revenues and overall revenues has fallen. And if you look at the relationship between transfers and subsidies and the labor force participation rate, up until a point in time, improvement in transfers and subsidies leads to an improvement in the labor force participation rate. But after a point in time, as transfers and subsidies become even larger, people become more relaxed and the labor force participation rate falls. In other words, our decline in the labor force participation rate has a high endogenous component. And also, as transfers and subsidies increase, you see the non-energy fiscal balance worsen. And these are not errors induced on us or placed on us from people in Washington or London or elsewhere. These are policy errors that we made here in the running of this macroeconomic setting over the last few years. And then there's, as part of one of the books I wrote, I actually calculated the welfare loss from CPEP. We spent $10 billion since 2002 on CPEP, and I often joke, and the media is here, and I'm saying this as a joke, so if you are quoting me, please quote this as a joke. I always say to my students, it's amazing to see people start work 8 o'clock and finish 7:45. It's just amazing. And the numbers just keep expanding in these programs, so it makes it difficult. How do you transform people who start work at 8 o'clock and finish 7:45 into highly productive agents working 8 hours a day? It has a real negative impact on the economy. And then, coupled with that now, you have the Venezuelans who are largely unregistered. So I'm going to use rough numbers. Instead of 16,525, I'm going to use 15,000. And out of the 60,000, so that's about 45,000 unregistered. It could be much more, because some commentators say 120,000 unregistered people. I'm going to use 60,000, of which 15,000 alone are registered. Where do these unregistered people work? In the informal sector. In the informal part of the non-tradable sector. You walk about in Gasparilla, which I'm familiar with, on a Friday night, and you will see where they work. And in order to facilitate the increase in output of informal, non-tradable sector workers, you need capital. Where will that capital come from? That capital comes from any other area, including agriculture and manufacturing, to facilitate the output increase in the informal, non-tradable sector that uses up a lot of foreign exchange, and therefore, by a policy process of not insisting that the Venezuelans are unregistered, we are potentially compromising our stock of exchange. I won't spend much time on GATE because we are the university. All I would say is that universal funding leads to a lot of benefits for the rich in relation to the amount that is needed. So if you have A plus B, where A plus B is total GATE funding, and A is the actual amount needed, and B is the excess amount above A, then B over A plus B is the amount that could be diverted for other purposes. And I quickly move on from that, Dean. Then we have the whole Dutch disease impact on the economy. And we saw the Dutch disease impact here. This, to me, is the Dutch disease impact, where...
But, again, he's slow, pedestrian, laborious.
I think when it bounces...
The only way you would miss that goal from about 6 inches, I mean, I'd get a nightmare about that goal still, is if you think you have Messi somewhere in the back that will make up amends somehow, and it didn't happen. In other words, that relaxation that comes with abundance of energy resources creates all kinds of problems. And you saw it here with CPEP, you saw it in other areas, and it manifests itself in a skewed distribution of labor. That's one of the things that policymakers has to be very careful about, because if what we had is a redistribution of the labor force from 1996 to 2024, where a greater proportion of the labor force went towards the services sector, where output per worker in the services sector is less than in manufacturing, and therefore asymptotically, by a process of the way the labor force evolved in terms of employment, we compromise long-run output. Because we put or we allowed more workers by virtue of our spending habits and consumption habits to end up in the services sector, which has a lower productivity than the manufacturing sector, and therefore by the change in the structure of employment occasioned by the change in the pattern of expenditure, we compromise the position on the production possibility frontier in which we operated, and therefore asymptotically squeezed the growth potential of the economy. These are things that we did. These are things that economists from this very university would say publicly and basically plead with policymakers for the last 20 years not to do. And that has been exactly done. What happened in the process is we compromised the structure of comparative advantage distribution. So we had it fairly wide, and now over time we have a much narrower range of commodities with comparative advantage, including a compromise of the size of the manufacturing sector, which is part of the non-booming tradable sector, and also a compromise of our tourism sector. This year, in the passage of time, one of the things I would have said to students is that getting this, you see, one of the things that people get confused about with energy wealth is this. If a country has $15, $5 beneath the soil and $10 above the soil, and you move $5 from beneath the soil and bring it above the soil, deputy principal, you still end up with 15. What would give you a chance to be able to have long-run smoothing of consumption is how you spend that $5 you bring from under the ground. But if you have a policy in which as you extract this $5, which is non-reproducible capital, and you spend it out immediately as you bring it above the ground, instead of putting it and converting it into reproducible capital, then it's gone. So all of the 433 billion in cumulative energy revenues that I showed in an earlier graph, we only have about $6 billion in the HSF, of which about 50% is profits, is interest income. So substantively, only about $3 billion US saved. And so instead of having a mammoth HSF from which we could extract a certain amount on an annual basis and smooth consumption, well, we spent it out on an annual basis basically, and now the medium-term outlook is very. I have 3 children in university. One of them somehow made it here today, and it's rough. It's going to be tough, and we as citizens, you know, that's why teaching at the university is such a joy, Dean. You get a chance to really transform lives and to put. You know, you could see, it's a joy to see your students progress and develop ideas and push on to the boundaries of capacity and knowledge. But the medium term is one that we would need all hands on deck and pulling in the same direction. And the structure of the economy, you know, we became one where non-tradable production as a proportion of tradable production increased too much. And again, the Venezuelans would have had an input here. Again, transfers and subsidies would have had an input here. And we know all of this. We know all of this, and then we turn around and ask, where the foreign exchange? If you have an economy where the ratio of non-tradable output to tradable is rising, then you expect at some point in time to have a foreign exchange problem, which is what we have now. I am not in the least surprised at all. And over time, you see the change in the structure of employment. You see manufacturing employment in particular fell from about 60,300 in about 2005 or thereabout. Now it's down to 39,000. Manufacturing sector employment decreased considerably, and because manufacturing sector output per worker is about 10 times that of agriculture, if we could design a formula in which over the next 5 years we increase manufacturing sector employment from 39,000 to about 75,000 via the e-tech park mechanism, using some type of public-private partnership logic, then we could transform the long-term growth potential of this economy. I worked out the probability. So you have 4 states in this economy, 4 hypothetical states of comparative advantage. No comparative advantage A, weak comparative advantage B, moderate comparative advantage C, and strong comparative advantage D. And I worked out the probability between 1999 to 2023 of starting in no comparative advantage and moving into other states, either weak, either no comparative advantage, weak comparative advantage, moderate comparative advantage, or strong comparative advantage. And the probability for Trinidad and Tobago is 91% starting off in no comparative advantage and remaining in no comparative advantage. Our policies about changing our structure of trade results needs a serious rethink. And in terms of our performance on tourism, if you look, and I'm watching the Dean here because I know she's a tourism specialist. If you look at the data from 2019 to 24, Dean, you would see as compared to other countries, our arrival traffic didn't do that well, and this is overnight arrival traffic. And even from 1995 to 2024, we are much behind some of the other more tourism-dependent states. And I am standing here today, and I don't think we have a choice. We are at the point where unless we push tourism, I am not focusing a lot on energy today. Other people will do that at other points in time. Unless we push tourism and non-energy exports for the next 10 years as intensively as we went after Jagan gas, we would have some more problems than we have now in the medium term. Another source of foreign exchange revenue, because everything really boils down to two variables in this country. Well, three variables. One, restarting growth. Two, improving the non-energy fiscal balance. And three, improving our foreign exchange inflows. And when you look at our foreign exchange inflows in relation, from remittances in relation to other countries, we are way, way behind. And if we could bring our remittances to Trinidad and Tobago up to the regional average, we could bring in a further $650 million US from remittances. And that's up if we bring it up to the regional average. So I started off the actual conversation with this year, showing you the geography of where we are. We started off at A in 1996 before the start turning on LNG. We drifted to a point somewhere close to B when all this gas was brought above the ground. With the spending of government, we moved to a point such as C. With what we would call the X inefficiency or the resource curve impact from a lot of money, we moved to a point such as D, and then with the inflow of Venezuelans and the contraction in natural gas from 4,400 mmcf per day to about 2,500 mmcf per day, we ended up at a point such as E, and ultimately we need to go to a point such as F. And I close with this slide here saying how we could get closer to a point such as F. Because at the end of the day, what technocrats really need to do is to provide that type of guidance. And I have learned the hard way in some cases that you could provide this guidance with all the sincerity in the world. And when you stand here, you come with all the sincerity in the world. You spend days and hours and thousands of hours thinking about this and mapping it out and understanding how can I help my people? How can I support my country? I don't want to run away. I would battle with the high murder level. I would battle with the unemployment. I will stay and fight. And then you put it in the public domain and it reaches where it sometimes reaches. Now, we have to expand tourism sector. And I provided some numbers there. And Dean, I would be interested at another place and another time to hear what you would have to say about this. Because I have worked out in order to reach 50% of the revenues from the energy sector, so the energy sector is slowly dying, to get 50% of energy exports into the medium term, maintaining the average expenditure that CSO says we had in 2023, that we need to reach 2.6 million tourists. And I'm saying by 2040, if we could set a timeline so we could get all the other infrastructure in place, we have a fighting chance in terms of tourism revenues. Now, when you look at our tourism multiplier is one of the highest in the Caribbean. When you look at our tourists per resident, it's one of the lowest in the Caribbean. And when you look at tourism, tourists per square kilometer, it's one of the lowest in the Caribbean. In other words, we have a lot of spare capacity. And you do not have a plant and keep it running with spare capacity when you have no forex. That makes absolutely no sense. So therefore, we need to change the way we use our possibilities in the tourism sector. Also, we need to go after more diaspora resources, remittances. We need to strengthen non-energy manufacturing exports. And, you know, there's a way, Shireen, that this could be done, and certainly not in the format I know it's not you. I know you heard from somewhere, you quoted somebody. But I can tell you, and I hope my students here could vouch for this, we are in 2024. Since 2012, a lot of the things that happen today, I would have been telling my students in class, and I saw a good bit of them here, because as economists, you understand the mechanics of the open petroleum economy and the mechanics of how our Dutch disease economy works. So you have a reasonably good idea. I am not surprised by anything I see. In fact, I'm surprised at the pace at which we counter it. And so you can use something called trade can analysis. You could look at your trade partners and what are the commodities on the upswing of their product cycle, what they are buying. And you could look at your comparative advantage base, and you could calculate, Deputy Principal, what Guyana or Suriname or the world will need more of in the next 15 years that aligns with what you can produce, and therefore use the e-tech park mechanisms to specialize further in that. That is things that economists can help with. And we put those type of things in the public domain. I'm on a chat with Professor Gonzalez and Dr. Tiwari and a few more people here. And we discuss those things routinely all the time. And we put it out in the public domain, and then you would see money being allocated for entertainment and money being allocated for substantively other things besides pushing the e-tech park, or besides getting TTMA to form a public-private partnership on a management system to help get industrial parks going. And you wonder, where is the technical support? Where is the technical logic? You hear me talking a lot about e-tech parks because I think, given the ease of doing business situation in the country, that's where easier transformation could take place. Reduce crime rate by a minimum of 50%. And I'm glad to see Indira here, Indira Sajwan Ali, a very good economist. And one of the things that I always use when I talk to students is a poll that she did at Hillview College, I believe it was last year, where after she was doing her post-budget presentation or whatever, she asked the students whether or not they would migrate. And the significant amount of students said because of crime, they will leave Trinidad and Tobago. And so, because of our extremely high level of capital flight, financial, and because of our high level of human capital flight, we need to work on crime so that we could keep people like the dean here and keep people like the deputy principal here. Otherwise, once people feel threatened, they would leave. And we don't want the young, bright 22, 23, 24, 25 years old leaving and not coming back, because then you lose the primary school education, the traffic light, the secondary school education, and all the money we spend on them, and some of them might even remit. We need to widen tertiary level TVET programs so that we could, and I'm seeing Bisham here because when I look at I'm not going to go into detail on this, but when I look at the ratio of people with university education to people with TVET education as a ratio of, I'm going to skip that point. I'm going to skip that point because here's probably not the best place for me to make that point. But what I would say is we need to push TVET education more than some other type of educations. We need to expand agro-processing chains so that we could get more value from our agricultural sector and therefore make it more attractive to farmers. But people wouldn't go into farming if you're getting $5 a pound for tomatoes. And I was surprised recently to learn that a crate of egg is now $40. But people wouldn't go into farming if it is not sufficiently lucrative. But if you add more value via processing, people would become more encouraged. Scale renewable energy projects. We have some going on, and if we could scale it, we would release some natural gas. Modernize ports and customs because the ease of doing business is just so difficult. And make changes in the economy in total that allows us to crowding more export-oriented activity, and both from a goods perspective and a services perspective. Deputy Principal, the way I see the Trinidad and Tobago economy is almost like, Derek, how are you? What are you doing to earn more foreign exchange, in the same sentence? Derek, how are you? What are you doing to earn more foreign exchange? That's my view of the Trinidad and Tobago economy today. I think policymakers need to see it that way, because in the medium term, we have a very rough outlook. And unless we pull together after Monday the 28th in the same direction, it could become more challenging. So I thank you for the opportunity to share just some thoughts and some ideas and some conversation on the journey that I took to get here, and also use the moment to explain how we could possibly change the foreign exchange outlook and the non-energy fiscal balance within a 10-year period for the benefit of all Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We are going to have some questions. Much questions as possible directly to the Professor based on his presentation. The questions and diagrams, maps, the football, the cricket, the personal life, how to catch good crowds. All right, any questions? We have some helpers with microphones, so maybe we can take.
Good day, everybody in Merrick. I'm a school safety officer attached to Success Lamantil, and I listened to your lecture, have been following the economics in and out over the last 5 years. Where does education fill the short-term, medium-term, long-term growth in terms of not only university, and I get what you're saying in terms of the TVET aspect of it, but also making it sustainable that our young people are able to go out there and earn as well as employ people, so that we are able to increase our, I would say, our local GDP in terms of what's going on.
Okay, so the problem is, whilst we need to educate more people with TVET education, the challenge in the economy is really the structure of production. And if we take an approach that expands manufacturing, that expands agriculture, that expands services, those are areas that help to open up employment opportunities. If you look at the petroleum sector, for example, in which we have focused a lot of our energy, I looked at the results this morning, actually, and employment in the petroleum sector is now 8,100, as compared to about 23,000 in about 2013, around there. In other words, the employment in the petroleum sector has fallen considerably. Employment in manufacturing is now about 39,000. It was about 64,000 at around 2003. If you use the e-tech park logic and you expand more productive space following the logic of import force substitution, which you have to calculate, or for export orientation, whatever we are doing must meet the objective of it must generate an opportunity for more fiscal revenue, so it must lower the non-energy fiscal balance. The e-tech park approach, I'm saying, via import substitution and export orientation would do that. And it would also help enhance the level of foreign exchange by either generating more foreign exchange or saving on the use of foreign exchange. And in those type of facilities, you create more job opportunities. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago recently introduced, I'm not sure if I have the correct name, I think it's a manufacturing apprenticeship program. I think that's an excellent start. But the program itself will generate people with the capacity to work in manufacturing and these various parks. But what you need is the umbrella intervention of widening supply capacity in terms of more e-tech opportunities, more firms that generate or that undertake economic activity for export or import substitution. What we have now is a preponderance of firms that engage in import for distribution. We cannot maintain the lifestyle of 4,400 mmcf of gas per day with 2,500 mmcf per day of gas. We cannot. So we therefore have to make hard decisions and change our structure of consumption, our structure of production, our structure of employment, and therefore the way in which we earn foreign exchange. So I hope I answered you there.
Right, thank you. We have a gentleman here.
Good afternoon, Professor. 2 questions. One, if I have understood you correctly, what you're saying now is stuff you've been saying for a long time. The correct courses of action are evident, but you can't get the policymakers to follow them. Is that right?
Basically, you are correct.
All right. So in the last 10 or 15 years, 3 very interesting schools of economic thought have emerged. I'm not an economist, but I do follow it. George Akerlof, Identity Economics, Schiller and Thaler, Animal Spirits, and I forget, Narrative Economics. In other words, it's not the nitty-gritty of economics, which you've wonderfully explained, but it's economic decision-making. What I have been trying to find out from UWI, are you doing any work on this? Not you per se, but as the university, because that seems to be what is the sticking point, is the assumption of economic rationality, which is not borne out by economic decision makers. That's the first question. Second question, Professor Adish Ramsubag, who I see sitting there, and Professor Patrick Hosein have 2 very, very good, not ideas, but areas of research which could lead to booms in Trinidad. That's biotechnology and computer science. And I've spoken to both of them, and nothing seems to be happening. So maybe the focus on manufacturing could be expanded. That's just a suggestion, but I would really like an answer to the identity economics question. Thanks.
So one of the challenges we have in a land of plenty is that you could engage economic activity in ways that doesn't always give the best outcomes, but because you have fallback when you have plenty, here used in the sense that when you have energy revenues, you could make errors and the errors could go unnoticed, you know. And I often reference the time period 2000 to 2014. We had a chance to, if we had gotten the heritage and stabilization formula correct, I think we would have had a lot more money in the heritage and stabilization fund. Meaning that in 1996, the sword was turned on the first train of Atlantic LNG. So you had a lot of foreign direct investment, and that year $1 billion was injected in the economy in foreign direct investment, and for change 2, 3, and 4, almost $3 billion US was injected. The momentum from that was transforming the Trinidad and Tobago economy alongside the spending of government and alongside the spending of these firms on other things, and the wages from these firms, these energy sector firms within the economy, including those in the refinery. We therefore did not need, at that point in time, to increase transfers and subsidies, because that had the trade-off of leading to a rise in inflation and hence an increase in something called the real effective exchange rate that in turn compromised our external competitiveness. So by virtue of having plenty, we made some errors that we shouldn't have made. If we had sterilized that energy rent and put all in the HSF, which should have started from 1999, from the get-go, not in 2007 or 8 or thereabouts, we would have been in a very different situation today. I'm saying that for completeness because we can't change it. But as a consequence of pushing all these energy resources after different things across those years, a lot of errors were made in terms of compromising some of our institutions in different ways. So you could have relaxed with a reduced amount of efficiency on your ease of doing business because energy revenues was coming in. You didn't need manufacturing to be a really dynamic player. You didn't need tourism to be a really dynamic player. You didn't need service exports to be a dynamic player because your current account balance was always in surplus. In many ways, it's like batting with Lara and seeing 501 runs on the board, 375, 400 not out, and people on the other end relaxing and making errors. So the type of problems you related to there in question number 1, in a sense, translates to me as resource curse related problems. As to whether or not any of my colleagues are working on those things, I think some of the people in Jamaica do work on institutions. I think Salises may have done some work on institutions in the past. I'm seeing Sanchez to come. I really believe Patrick Watson did some work on it in the past. I may be wrong. And in relation to your second comment, we as a people need to get serious. We need to realize that we are no longer, this is a point I keep making when I am interviewed, and I'm trying to run away from as much interview these days as possible. After Monday the 28th, on Monday the 29th, we are going to still wake up to 2,500 MMCF per day of gas being produced, out of a maximum needed amount of about 4,400 MMCF per day. All of that translates into a limited amount of resource capability, and therefore revenues would fall far short of expenditure. It therefore requires a different type of thinking. It requires a type of thinking that could bring all of the population together, because, I mean, from all the various comments you hear and from your observation of party elections, you expect that this election result is going to be fairly close again. And if you are pushing forward with half of the population feeling in some form or the other that they are not fully involved and included as they should be, it can affect their productivity, it can affect the way that they contribute to the economy, and that's not good for an economy producing 2,500 MMCF per day of gas. So it requires a really outstanding dynamic leader, you know, and I always think that leader is my good friend, Dr. Tiwari, but he has hidden and stayed away from some of those things. I have engaged with him for about 25 years, and I have great confidence in his capacity to pool resources, but that's just my honest response, that we need a leader to emerge in some form or the other that can help us make the best use of this 2,500 MMCF per day. And that's my final comment on that. Paul Collier, 1996, writing out of Oxford University, did a paper on resource rents and ethnic fractionalization. Some of the most difficult places to manage is countries with different ethnicities. And we are a classic case of that in terms of the way we use oil resources for different activities.
I think I'll take a question here and then one in the back. Change your mics.
Right. First, let me say it was an excellent presentation. Thanks. I'm glad I'm here. Okay, so we have to increase our production in terms of for foreign exchange, and we also have to decrease our appetite for our spending. Let me see how I could start this. Well, let me go in the 70s, where we had the whole Point Lisa's idea of monetizing the gas and all the derivatives from it that did us well in terms of the whole Point Lisa's plan and that time. do we need a thinking tank in terms of, okay, let me see if I could share this. Tourism. Jamaica is about 4 million tourists lately in there. We are very low, very, very low. We have to sort of think outside the box. For example, Wallafield, for example, that has its own history of war and all that. We could bring down my ideas, RF aircrafts and blimps and so on, and set up a tourist center there of the history of what tourists, because we have a massive airport at the time of World War II. The Venezuelans, for example, that you mentioned, 45,000 undocumented. I mean, Canada have undocumented people that goes up. Well, people go up every year for 6 months. Could we work out something with having the Venezuelans work on the Caroni 77,000 acres that was handed over in Caroni 1975 Limited, where we could plant and produce crops and so on, using the same Venezuelan people here for a time frame. Production, manufacturing. At one time, we used to produce excellent shirts, elite. We used to produce excellent shoes, K shoes. Employs thousands of people. Low paying, but employs thousands of people. One of the problems in our society now is young people looking for jobs. We could see it when they had looking for police and prisoners. You saw thousands of people lining up, young men, young women, to be employed in the security industry and so on. We have an appetite to buy things, cutting down that cost of food. This is where you planting fish farms, for example. These are the things we need to look at as a country, in my opinion, and I'm sure you could share with that. Coming into our airport, for example, that same rotunda in the middle of the airport, why is not an upside-down steel pan with 2 sticks? Why is not there a center stage at the airport where you have the kings and queens of carnival every year being turned around instead of all these who was prime minister and who was president? Nobody cares about that, And have these things already. As you enter the airport, you realize that this is a tourist center. Why not? Well, the place has to be clean, our rivers has to be clean if we have tourists here. There's so much work to be done to move forward, but there are great possibilities. Why not? At time Amar used to assemble cars. Why we don't look into assembling stuff? Why we are not building boats and ships to export? There are people who have a lot of abilities here with boat building and so on. We could market those to South America. So what I'm saying that we need a think tank. That's how you had, I can't remember his name now. Like what we had before. Pick out 4 or 5 where we could earn foreign exchange by exporting certain things and see what is feasible, what can be done, what should be done. Because the oil and the gas, we're no longer producing 4.3 trillion. Right now, our oil was 120,000 15, 20 years ago, is now about 50-something thousand barrels of gas, barrels of oil. So I'm just suggesting these things to you. And because we got to come down to what we have to do. And these are just some of my little ideas, and I don't know, just throwing off to you how you think about it.
Right.
Mike, can I?
Okay, good.
Yeah?
Before you speak, let me let the professor respond to the comments.
So I agree that we should reinstall some version of the Economic Development Advisory Board. It's a real pity that we allowed it to close in the first place. How we make it, how we fund it is an important issue. It should be independently funded, and the members of the Economic Development Advisory Board, I think Ronald was a member of that board, I'm seeing Ronald here, shouldn't have to answer to no minister. They should submit their reports to the Prime Minister or the President directly and let them think. But all of those things you are saying there are very possible. But we don't have to force that into operation, What we need to do is to cut crime significantly and improve the environment in which business activity can take place and let the market flourish. Let the market produce what the market wants. So it's very possible, and I think one of the first things that should be done in the new government is to reestablish that Economic Development Advisory Board and pay the people well. You know, I am talking about paying them well enough that they will not have to go and work at the side. So you bring Ronald Ramke soon, you give him a salary that would keep him working on that job for the full month, all day, instead of flying off to Russia to work for 3 days on some private project and flying back. Keep him engaged and take it seriously. I think that's definitely the route we should go, because the EDAB was doing well in my understanding of the facts under Terence Farrell. It's a real pity it closed, and I would always trust an institution like EDAB to come up with scientifically driven ideas as compared to other government entities. Somebody mentioned two really good names earlier, but they mentioned, I call him my partner in crime, Adish, and Patrick Hosein. I mean, those guys have a lot of ideas, but they need an environment in which to allow the ideas to grow. And that's where the EDAB, I think, could make the greatest contribution, just like it did in Singapore, to the development of our country. But we need to find a formula very quickly in which we sterilize the energy rents. Now is a bad time, so we have to do it within the next 3 years, sometime probably at the end of the next 3 years when Manatee comes on stream. But as long as you have energy revenues circulating, you are going to get this problem where people believe that they have latitudinal fallback. I tried to pull up here the slide showing the amount of cumulative energy revenues we collected, $433 billion. I'm going to ask you, did Antigua collect that amount of money? Did St. Lucia collect it? Did Grenada collect it? Did Jamaica collect it? None of these countries, most of the countries in the world would not have collected that $433 billion. Yet still, we collected that $433 billion, and our economic performance is nowhere. If you use real average GDP growth as your criteria for measuring performance, our performance is nowhere near any of those countries without $1 single in energy revenues for the time period 2016 to 2024. Go and look at the IMF database that came out 2 days ago, and you would see exactly what I'm saying.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Yeah. Good night. Roger, I want to congratulate you on a really excellent presentation. I just want to take one moment to say that Roger Hosein, I'm an economist, but there's no individual that I know that economics is all-consuming as it is with Professor Roger Hosein. And Roger, I've had the opportunity to work with you. I have tremendous respect for you, especially given the fact that I'm a qualitative economist and you are quantitative, so, you know, I'm always able to get the data that I need to support my own thinking from you. But tonight I have new respect for you, Roger, because lots of your bringing I didn't know. And to think where you have come from and where you are today makes me extremely proud. And I'm sure if there are members of your family here, I want them to know that you stand tall, you stand proud, and you stand and represent all of us. And I'm really very, very happy to call myself your colleague. I know, that said, I just want to say, you know, I'm a converted. Everything that you have said, I believe in. I've been articulating for development beyond oil and gas for a very, very, very long time. What you have put up here just reinforces what I've been saying for a long time. And all the points very salient. I just want to put something else in the pot, which we must consider now, since the elections in the United States, where we have a new dispensation, a dispensation that is seriously turning things around. And while we know that we must aggressively export things outside of energy, and even our energy exports, going forward, even if we were to get some significant fines and increase the volumes again, there could be serious challenges in terms of entering the export markets. The whole issue of tarification, of the impact and the cost of shipping, given what kinds of policies can be put in place tomorrow. All of these things affect us. It affects the cost of our imports, which we need to export, the cost of the competitiveness of our exports. So, I mean, just to throw that out to you and ask you, how does that factor in your thinking going forward as we seek to do all of the things that you have suggested? Thank you.
To be honest, I think that the Trump tariffs and the decline in energy revenues has the capacity to act as a blessing for the Trinidad and Tobago economy. I think it has put an enormous strain on our non-energy fiscal balance and our overall balance, and we either crash the economy completely or we live up to the task and we do the structural transformation and put in the hard work and turn the economy around. You could avoid the IMF and implement your own austerity measures, because we cannot continue with transfers and subsidies absorbing 54% of government expenditure. That is, it is impossible. So it's a golden moment. I see this crisis as a golden moment for us to engage real serious. We could blame Trump, we could blame mature oil fields and gas fields, we could put the blame on whoever you want. That is incidental. And it gives us the opportunity to change the perspective of what people expect from the government. The government has the golden opportunity to say, well, here what's going on now. We only have 2,500 MMCF of gas today, And we went at 4,400, we give all your gas subsidy and fuel subsidy and energy subsidy. We don't have it again, so we're going to make some change. And they have, whoever comes into power on Monday night / Tuesday has the best opportunity to make solid changes and blame extraneous forces. I'm not saying that you take away from the poorest and most vulnerable. I'm saying you must preserve those. But too much things in this country, in my judgment, is subsidized. And you should start with, of course, looking at the output of state-owned enterprises and looking at their productivity and which one is overstaffed and understaffed, and making changes commensurate with your capacity to subsidize. Because at some point in time, our capacity to subsidize, and I think it's already ended, will come to an end. And we would have to make these changes forcibly if some people from Washington visit us. I am saying we could make some of those changes Tuesday morning and blame external shocks, say Trump had a bad impact on the economy and the gas production fell too much, and make the changes, but the time is now.
Good evening. Thanks again for a fantastic presentation. I have more of a comment as a national security professional. There was a time when we thought that when an economy is doing bad, crime usually increases. But we've had an energy boom from 2002 to 2014. But the rate and complexity of crime continued to increase. All right? So it suggests to us significantly that whether the state of the economy is a boom or a bust, the rate and complexity of crime continues to increase. And I'm making the observation against the comment that you made in your own personal experience, the way crime is impacting upon your own productivity in terms of where you feel confident that you can go and not go. It has to be impacting upon the economy in significant ways that I think is under-researched. So I just wanted to make that comment in light of your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, sir. I realized that was a comment. I do have a question, if I may ask it just before the end of the day.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry to be so, I'm not sure what the word is, impolite, I suppose. But well, I'm a young person. I'm in the final year of my degree here at UWI. And I don't know much about the economics, but I believe everything you're saying, and I think you're being modest, actually. I think it's worse than you're imparting to us, because you're being polite, perhaps. So my question is, you might be aware of some of the comparative advantages we have here in Trinidad. If you could take the young minds of UWI, for example, and direct them towards what you think, based on the comparative advantages we have, based on the chances that still exist. If you could say, guys, everybody run over here and put some critical thought here, where would you tell me to go?
That's a difficult one. And it's good that it's coming from a student. My first answer to you would be, we could definitely calculate it. So this is not the answer I'm going to give you. This is the answer for the more seasoned people in the room. That's something we could definitely work out what to produce. There are methodologies we can use to fine-tune that. In terms of what can be produced now by a young third-year university student moving into the future, because we are in 2025, we will take until 2028 to get back to 2019 GDP. We will take until 2033 to get back to 2016 GDP. It's slow growth. As income is growing slowly, the first call on income would be food. I would say to you, start up with something in the food sector. So, I am part of a group called the Shaw Foundation. And Derek may have missed this. We have given out 5.6 million seedlings throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And it has been well received by the public. As I said earlier in the conversation, I have 3 children in university, one of whom managed to make it here 15 minutes late. And he has a little plant shop where he plants fruit trees, and he interacts with the Shaw Foundation via his fruit trees. And he takes it very seriously, and it has been going very good, because as income falls or as income decreases, the first call on income, according to Engel's law, is food. And therefore, if in that setting you get involved in things related to food, you have a greater probability of success than other things. But having said that, one of the things I have learned over the years is that if you are in third year and you have your various secondary school chat groups and your university chat groups and other chat groups probably in your community, one of the things that you would find is that there's a lot of cross-selling. So in Mount Hope, for example, my sons always say to me what other people are doing if they have solar panels or all kind of things the students are doing to earn sideline money. And each one supports the other. And I'm saying you may be surprised at how a business formed around that doesn't use foreign exchange. The trick is to try to do something that doesn't put you at an immediate disadvantage for foreign exchange. Because whilst you are getting 200 US at the counter now, I don't want to speculate how much you will be getting next year, but 200 may be a lot. And so if you could do something that allows you to have a product that doesn't use foreign exchange and market it within your chat groups, that would be useful. And you will also be surprised that people like me love to support people like you when we see you are serious, hardworking, dedicated, and putting out an honest effort. In fact, honesty is one of the things that you could sell the most. If you are selling water and you are serious and you are hardworking, you could make some money. And I'm serious about using that literal water example. I am saying to you that if I had to go and sell water now, I could make $1 million. But it requires determined effort. One of the things I did as an undergrad, linked to your comment, is I worked out which commodities, as I started to do more economics, I worked out which commodities had the best income elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand, and a surge in demand in particular times of the year. And so I ended up on these transactionary items based upon the simple economics I had done at those points in time, and they generated a lot of money. But part of the success was, somebody mentioned it, I think it was Derek, this animal spirits part of the success comes with that entrepreneurial drive. And people, especially at your age, people higher up the ladder have a great respect when they see that entrepreneurial drive at people like you. And I see it in my PhD students. I have about 10 PhD students, and you have some of them, you have to tell them, "Oi, take it easy, don't work tomorrow." And they climb the highest rung of the ladder. And some of them, you have to call them every 5 minutes and say, "Oh, madam, work." So people respect that drive. And so year 3, being about 22, 23 years, invest by using that drive in something that has a high probability of sale during an environment in which income is not buoyant. So I pointed out food as an example. And does not depend on foreign exchange, because those options are very limited. And as a young boy, you will struggle to get foreign exchange. And behind whatever you select, put a lot of effort and sincerity and honesty in it, just as you do your work, because nothing will bail you out like a first-class honors, and you will reach different levels. That's my honest advice to you.
Thank you very much for all those who asked questions and made comments.
Okay.
Just brilliant, Professor. I will revise my what an economist does. You've convinced me. All right, so thank you, Dr. Jerome Tilaksing. He's a committee member from the Faculty of Humanities on the Open Lectures Committee. We are coming to an end of this evening's proceedings, but before we end, I would like to invite Dr. Taihimba Salandi, he who is another committee member from the Faculty of Social Sciences, to deliver the vote of thanks. Dr. Salandi? All right, okay. So in lieu of, I think if he was not able to make it, I will take up that role. So it is quite an honor to be able to say thank you. Thank you is not enough, Professor Raja Hosein. There are great talks, and there are wonderful talks, and there are talks that inspire. Tonight I have been inspired. So a great thank you to our speaker, and we'd like to invite Professor Raja Hosein to the stage to make a presentation as a small token of our thank you to you for enlightening us this afternoon. And Dr. Chedi, Professor Chedi, I will invite you to the stage to make the presentation. All right, so you know, events like this don't just happen in isolation. And for that, there are so many people, wonderful people to thank. And I'd love to thank Marketing and Communications, Chanel Glasgow and her team. They are amazing. Even though I'm chair of the committee, I tell them all I seem to have to do is turn up, because they do an amazing job. And it takes a lot of wheels turning all around, the facilities management, the security at the university, all who have made this evening come alive, the people who have handled the media, and even as we come to the end of this intellectually inspiring evening, and Professor Hosein has left us with a lot of food for thought, and in keeping with that food theme, there are some light snacks for you on the way out, and we'd like to thank the caterers for arranging that. And so, folks, finally, in the words of the great Porky Pig, that's all, folks. I bid you good night and have a safe journey home.